set up to. Sorry, not my TikTok, my Twitch, I mean. Okay, hold on a minute. Part 6 and chapter 8 today. This time, super jazzed. Got my 2 fresh subscribers. We're up to 5 now on YouTube, so big thank you to my supporters. Dude. We've still got a long way to go, of course, before my channel is quote-unquote successful, but hey, progress is progress. Okay, here we go, chapter 8. When he went into Sonia's room, it was already getting dark. All day Sonia had been waiting for him in terrible anxiety. Dunya had been waiting with her. She had come to her that morning, remembering Sverdlov's words that Sonia knew. We will not describe the conversation and tears of the 2 girls and how friendly they became. Dunya gained one comfort, at least from that interview, that her brother would not be alone. He had gone to her, Sonia, first with his confession. He had gone to her for human fellowship when he needed it. She would go with him wherever fate might send him. Dunya did not ask, but she knew it was so. She looked at Sonia almost with reverence, and at first almost embarrassed her by it. Sonia was almost on the point of tears. She felt herself, on the contrary, hardly Dunya's gracious image when she had bowed to her. Their first meeting in Raskolnikov's room had remained in her mind as one of the fairest visions of her life. Dunya at last became impatient to her brother's room to await him there. She kept thinking that he would come there first. When she had gone, Sonia began to be tortured by the dread of his committing suicide. And Dunya too feared it. But they had spent the day trying to persuade each other that that could not be, and both were less anxious while they were together. As soon as they parted, each thought of nothing else. Sonia remembered how Sverdlov had said to her the day before that Raskolnikov had 2 alternatives, Siberia or... Besides, she knew his vanity, his pride, and his lack of faith. Is it possible that he has nothing but cowardice and fear of death to make him live? She thought at last in despair. Meanwhile, the sun was setting. Sonia was standing in dejection, looking intently out of the window. But from it she could see nothing but the unwhite. At last, when she began to feel sure of his death, he walked. She gave a cry of joy, but looking carefully into his face, she turned pale. Yeah, I thought he was going to turn himself in, but guess not. Yes, said Raskolnikov, smiling. I have come for your cross, Sonia. It was you who told me to go to the crossroads. Why is it you're frightened now? It's come to that. Sonia gazed at him astonished. His tone seemed strange to her. A cold shiver ran over her. But in a moment she guessed that the tone and the words were a mask. He spoke to her looking away as though to avoid meeting her eyes. You see, Sonia, I've decided that it will be better so. There is one fact, but it's a long story and there's no need to discuss it. But do you know what angers me? It annoys me that all those stupid brutish faces will be gaping at me directly, pestering me with their stupid questions, which I shall have to answer. They'll point their fingers at me. Phew. You know I'm not going to Porfiry. I'm sick of him. I'd rather go to my friend, the explosive lieutenant. How I shall surprise him, what a sensation I shall make. But I must be cooler. I've become too irritable of late. Making my fist at my sister just now because she turned to take a look at me. It's a brutal state to be in. What am I coming to? He seemed hardly to know what he was doing. Concentrate his attention on anything. His eyes seemed to gallop after one another. He talked incoherently. His hands trembled slightly. Without a word, Sonia, for some reason I'm thinking of that song by Radiohead. Blame it on the black star. Blame it on the falling sky. I think that song just shot in my head just now. And of course this came first, but still a good song. And probably not inspired by the book Crime and Punishment, if I had to guess. Yeah, I think that was actually based on a relationship that Tom York had. But anyway, without a word, Sonia took out of the drawer 2 crosses, one of cypress wood and one of copper. She made the sign of the cross over herself and over him, and put the wooden cross on his neck. It's the symbol of my taking up the cross, he laughed, as though I had not suffered much till now. The wooden cross, that is the peasant one, the copper one, that is Lizaveta's. You'll wear yourself, show me. So she had it on. At that moment, I remembered 2 things like these too, a silver one and a little icon. Those would be appropriate now, really. But I'm talking nonsense and forgetting what matters. You see, I've come to warn you, Sonia, so that you might know. That's all. That's all I came for. But I thought I had more to say. Go yourself. Well, now I'm going to prison, and you'll have your... Get it over with. You've been saying that you're going to do it for the last several chapters. Lollygagging about. Get it on. Get it over with. Get it on. What are you crying for? You two, don't. Leave off. How I hate it all. But his feeling was stirred. His heart ached. As he looked at her, why is she grieving too? He thought to himself. What am I to her? Why does she weep? Why is she looking after me like my mother or Dunya? She'll be my nurse. He still doesn't comprehend Sonia's character. Like, she's probably the kindest character in the book, with the only exception being maybe Rasmussen. Yeah, I think he's still thinking that she's like him, but she's very different from him. She's extremely... Cross yourself. Say at least one prayer, Sonia begged in a timid... Certainly, as much as you'd like. And sincerely, Sonia, sincerely. But he wanted to say something quite different. He crossed himself several times. Sonia took up her shawl and put it over her head. It was the green draped dame shawl of which Marmeladov had spoken, the family shawl. Raskolnikov thought of that looking at it, but he did not ask. He began to feel himself that he was certainly forgetting things and was disgustingly agitated. He was frightened at this. He was suddenly struck too by the thought that Sonia meant to go with him. What are you doing here? Stay. I'll go alone, he cried in cowardly vexation. He moved towards the door. What's the use of going in procession? He muttered, going out. Sonia remained standing in the middle of the room. He had not even said goodbye to her. He had forgotten her. A poignant and rebellious doubt surged in his heart. Was it right? Was it right, all this? He thought again as he went down the stairs. Couldn't he stop and retract it all, and not go? But he still went. He felt suddenly once for all that he mustn't ask himself questions. As he turned into the street, he remembered that he had not said goodbye to Sonia, that he had left her in the middle of the room in her green shawl, not daring to stir after he had shouted at her, and he stopped for a short moment. At the same instant, another thought dawned upon him, as though it had been lying in wait to strike him then. Why, with what object did I go to her just now? Beats me. I don't even know why you confessed to her. I told her on business. On what business? I had no sort of business. To tell her I was going, but where was the need? Do I love her? No, I drove her away just now like a dog. Did I want her crosses? I wanted her tears. I wanted to see her terror, to see how her... Something to cling to, something to delay me, some friendly face to see. I dared to believe in myself, to dream of what I would do. I'm a barely contemptible wretch, contemptible. He walked along the canal bank and had not much further to go, But on reaching the bridge, he stopped and turning out of his way along it went to the Haymarket. He looked eagerly to the left and right, and gazed intently at every object, and could not fix his attention on anything, everything slipped away. In another week, another month, I shall be driven in a prison van over this bridge. How shall I look at the canal then? I should like to remember this, slipped into his mind. Look at this sign. How shall I read those letters then? It's written here, Campany. That's a thing to remember, that letter A. To look at it again. In a month, how shall I look at it then? What shall I be feeling and thinking then? Of course, it must all be interesting in its way. It must all be interesting. What am I thinking about? I'm becoming a baby. I'm showing off to myself. Why am I ashamed? Phew. How people shove. That fat man. A German he must be. He pushed against me. Does he know whom he pushed? Does it really matter? Like you're not that important, Raskolnikov. You're a murderer. That's about it. You wrote a paper. That's about it. That's about all you've done. There's a peasant woman with a baby begging. It's curious that she thinks me happier than she is. I might give her something for the incongruity of it. Here's a 5-kopek piece left in my pocket. Where did I get it? Here, take it, my good woman. God bless you, the beggar chanted in a lachrymose voice. Tearful, or given to weeping. He went into the Haymarket. It was distasteful, very distasteful to be in a crowd, but he walked just where he saw most people. He would have given anything in the world to be alone, but he knew himself that he would not have remained alone for a moment. There was a man drunk and disorderly in the crowd. There was a ring around him. Raskolnikov squeezed his at the drunken man and suddenly gave a short, jerky laugh. A minute later, he'd forgotten him and did not see him, though he still stared. He moved away at last, not remembering where he was, but when he got into the middle of the square, an emotion suddenly came over him, overwhelming him body and mind. He suddenly recalled Sonia's words. Go to the crossroads, bow down to the people, kiss the earth, for you have sinned against it too. Say aloud to the whole world, I'm a murderer. He trembled, remembering that, and the hopeless misery and anxiety of all the time, especially the last hours, had weighed so heavily upon him that he positively clutched at the chance of his new, unmixed, complete sensation. It came over him like a fit. It was like a single spark kindled in his soul and spreading fire through him. Everything in him softened at once, and the tears started into his eyes. He fell to the earth on the spot. He knelt down in the middle of the square, bowed down to the earth, and kissed that filthy earth with bliss and rapture. He got up and bowed down a second time. He's boozed, the youth near him observed. There was a roar of laughter. He's going to Jerusalem, brothers, and saying goodbye to his children and his country. He's bowing down to all the world and kissing the great city of St. Petersburg and its pavement, added a workman who was a little drunk. Quite a young man, too, observed a third. And a gentleman, someone observed soberly. There's no knowing who's a gentleman who isn't nowadays. These exclamations and remarks checked Raskolnikov, and the words, I'm a murderer, which were perhaps on the point of dropping from his lips, died away. He never could do it. He can kill 2 women with an axe, but he can never confess to anyone except Sonia for some reason. Yeah, Sonia is the only person he can confess to for some strangers. He bore these remarks quietly, however, and without looking around, he turned down a street leading to the police office. He had a glimpse of something on the way which did not surprise him. He had felt that it must be so. The second time he bowed down in the Haymarket, he saw standing 50 paces from him on the left Sonia. She was hiding from him behind one of the wooden shanties in the marketplace. She had followed him then on his painful way. Raskolnikov at that moment felt and knew once and for all that Sonia was with him forever and would follow him to the ends of the earth, wherever fate might take him. It wrung his heart, but he was just reaching the fatal place. He went into the yard fairly resolutely. He had to mount to the third story. I shall be some time going up, he thought. He felt as though the fateful moment was still far off, as though he had plenty of time left for consideration. Shells lying about the spiral stairs, again the open doors of the flat, and the same fumes and stench coming from them. Raskolnikov had not been here since that day. His legs were numb, gave way under him, but still they moved forward. He stopped for a moment to take a breath, to collect himself, so as to enter like a man. But why? What for? He wondered, reflecting. If I must drink the cup, what difference does it make? The more revolting, the better. The figure of the explosive lieutenant. Was he actually going to him? Couldn't he go to someone else? To Nikodym Fomitch? Couldn't he turn back and go straight to Nikodym Fomitch's lodgings? At least then it would be done privately. No. To the explosive lieutenant. If he must drink it off at once. Turning cold and hardly conscious, he opened the door to the office. There were very few people in it this time, only a house porter and a peasant. The doorkeeper did not even peep out from behind his screen. Raskolnikov walked into the next room. Perhaps I still need not speak, passed through his mind. Some sort of clerk not wearing a uniform was settling himself at a bureau to write. In the corner, another clerk was seating himself. Zametov was not there, nor, of course, Nikodym Fomitch. No one in? Raskolnikov asked, addressing the person at the bureau. Whom do you want? Not a sight was seen, but I sent the Russian. How does it go on in the fairy tale? I've forgotten. At your service, a familiar voice cried suddenly. Raskolnikov shut for him. He had just come in from the third room. It is the hand of fate, thought Raskolnikov. Why is he here? You've come to see us? What about? Cried Ilya Petrovich. He was obviously in an exceedingly good humor and perhaps a trifle exhilarated. If it's on business, you're rather early. It's only a chance that I'm here. However, I'll do what I can. I must admit that I... What is it? Excuse me. Just after sunset, and at the last time Raskolnikov visited the reproach for coming too late. And that's by the train. No. Yeah, I'm not sure what the translator means here. Yeah, I'm not sure what he means at all, frankly. Is he suggesting that the police office had a change in hours or something? I don't really know how in St. Petersburg worked in those days. I really have no idea. Raskolnikov. Imagine I'd forgotten. Don't think I'm like that. Rojanovich. That's it, isn't it? Rodion Romanovich. Yes, of course. Rodion Romanovich.